The richest woman in the city was divorced and had a child. I quickly married her for the second time. 5 years into our marriage, I quit my job and wholeheartedly became a good father and husband at home. Until Isabella's ex-husband suddenly planned to return to the country. That night, our 5-year-old daughter threw my things from Isabella's room into the guest room. "You're the stepfather. You can't sleep with my mom. I can't make my dad sad. Get out of her house." The maid laughed at me, but Isabella raised her eyebrows and tried to persuade me. It's normal for our daughter to side with her biological father. Don't take it to heart. Anyway, my current husband is you. I quietly responded with an and silently packed the thrown luggage. In the second half of the night, Isabella tried to climb into my bed, but I refused. The marriage agreement will expire in 2 days. After 2 days, we'll get a divorce. Isabella didn't care at all and pinched my cheek. Are you angry with our daughter? Or is it because of William? He's just coming back to see the child. He can't threaten your position. Besides, I'm very satisfied with you now. Why do you want a divorce? I lowered my eyes and said, because I'm tired. Isabella let out a slightly surprised chuckle and lifted my chin with her slender fingers. Tired? Weren't you the one who married me for money in the first place? Are you trying to imitate William and leave, just to make me care more about you? William was Isabella's unforgettable ex-husband. I pushed her hand away and said, I won't do that. Isabella sneered. You'd better not do that. William is naturally proud. I owed too much debt and dragged him down back then. I can understand why he chose to leave. But you're not him. If you leave, I won't try to keep you. Besides, I've given you a lot of money these past few years, right? I can still give you as much money in the future. Now that I've said this, do you still want a divorce? Her voice was filled with disdain and sarcasm, stabbing straight into my heart. I smiled bitterly, and my eyes dimmed. In the 5 years since I married Isabella, she often compared me with William. In her and our daughter's hearts, no matter how well I did, I was always inferior to William. I wasn't as handsome as him, and I wasn't as dazzling as him. Maybe it was because of the way we met, but I felt that she had never really respected me. 5 years ago, Isabella was on the verge of bankruptcy. At her lowest point, William didn't hesitate to abandon her and their daughter. When she was in her most difficult situation, she came to me with a sum of money and asked me to marry her under an agreement and take care of the child. I agreed. Over the past 5 years, I have given all my sincere love. But in the end, I was just being greedy, actually fantasizing about having a real home. Now, even bringing up the divorce feels like a joke. Seeing that I didn't say anything, Isabella gradually grew impatient. She rummaged through the cabinet, took out a stack of cash, and placed it on the bedside table. Daphne didn't humiliate you in front of a lot of people. And you're really not her biological father. Is there a need to be so aggrieved and keep pestering me in the middle of the night? Here, the money is for you. Does it soothe your self-esteem now? This stack of cash was at least 100,000 yuan. I love money very much. A person who has been poor for a long time can't live without it. In the past, whenever I was wronged and she gave me money, I would always be overjoyed. But now I want to leave even more. I looked at Isabella and said, we'll get a divorce in 2 days. Let's start sleeping in separate rooms from tonight. Isabella finally became so angry that she laughed. She suddenly smashed the table lamp on the bedside table and looked down at me coldly. James, it seems that I've liked you too much recently. You actually dare to push your luck like this. Get out. Go and stand in the courtyard to cool off and think carefully if you really think you've had enough of the good life before you talk to me about divorce. I didn't hesitate. I turned around and walked out of the room in my pajamas. After 5 years of marriage, I knew Isabella's temper. She seemed gentle, but in fact, she was bossy. I had to be as docile as a pet all the time, and only then would she be nice to me. I had disobeyed her repeatedly today, and she was definitely angry. But the suitcase that was thrown out by my daughter tonight was enough to make me understand that no matter how much a stepfather gives, he is still an outsider. I really should leave. After booking a flight to Paris for tomorrow, I found a guest room and went to sleep. I woke up on time at 6 in the morning because Isabella didn't like the breakfast made by the nanny. She only liked the breakfast I made. So, over the past 5 years, I prepared breakfast for my wife and daughter every day. It had already become my biological clock. Today, I ignored it, forced myself to close my eyes, and went back to sleep. I don't know how long it had passed, but suddenly there was a loud bang. Isabella pushed open my door and said angrily, "James, why didn't you wake me and Daphne up today? There are no suits or dresses prepared, and you didn't even prepare breakfast." I still lay on the bed with my eyes closed and said, "Isabella, if I don't wake you up, can't you set an alarm clock yourself?" Isabella was slightly taken aback. I had arranged her mornings for the past 5 years. Suddenly having to rely on herself made her a bit annoyed. "Isn't this your obligation as a husband? William could do it. Why can't you?" Oh, that ex-husband was indeed a good husband and father. Although I had never met him, he often sent me text messages saying that he was coming back soon and asking me to pack my things and get out. With my eyes closed, I said, "You can get back together with your ex-husband. I have no objections." Isabella frowned tightly and said, "Is that what you thought about all night? James, be realistic. You have no education and no experience. After being a full-time stay-at-home dad for so many years, you're completely out of touch with society. Can you survive without me? I know why you're throwing a tantrum. Our daughter threw your things and said she likes William. You're not really sad. You just think the marriage agreement is about to expire and you want more money. It's okay. I can give you more. I'll add 100,000 yuan a month. Stop throwing a tantrum." She gave me an ultimatum. "I have a meeting in the morning. You get up and send Daphne to school." After saying that, she turned around and left. I slowly opened my eyes. My eyes were red, but in the end, I didn't say anything. I suppressed all the grievances and heartaches that welled up in my heart. In Isabella's eyes, I had always been a man who could be bought with money. She really had enough sincerity in using money to keep me, but she didn't know that I was determined to get a divorce. Moreover, I didn't want to wait for her consent to leave anymore. I got up, brushed my teeth, and when I went out, I happened to see our daughter standing at the door with her school bag on her back. When she saw me, she let out a dissatisfied humph. I ignored her and took a piece of bread for myself. Daphne immediately said, "I don't want bread. I want mushroom porridge." However, when she saw me stuffing the bread into my mouth, she suddenly froze and realized that it wasn't for her. At this moment, her stomach growled inappropriately, and she blushed and accused me. "Hey, stop eating. Hurry up and send me to school." I sat down and ate. "You can go to school by yourself." Daphne looked at me in disbelief. You want me to go by myself?" I glanced at her and said, "You're already 7 years old. You can go to school by yourself." She stamped her foot angrily, and her little face was full of dissatisfaction with me. "You really are a bad stepfather. No wonder my classmates said that you'd reveal your true nature sooner or later." "Humph, I don't want you to send me. When my dad comes back, he'll definitely send me to school every day." When she mentioned her dad, her eyes lit up visibly. "My dad is the best person in the world. The breakfast he makes must be 10,000 times, no, 100 million times better than yours. When my dad comes back, I'll ask Mom to drive you, the bad guy, away." Over the past 5 years, I had been in charge of all her food, clothing, housing, and transportation. I was the one who took care of her when she was sick and in the hospital, but she had never once praised me, and she had never even met William. They had just talked on the phone a few times. With just a few sweet words from William, she could come up with 10,000 reasons why he was good. But seeing Daphne's expectant look, I fell silent. She was probably going to be disappointed. Back then, William was afraid of living a hard life and was willing to divorce and abandon his daughter. Now that he was coming back with a purpose, how could he really be good to his daughter? However, it was none of my business anymore. Daphne opened the door wide and called for the driver to take her to school. After I finished eating, I started packing, erasing all the memories of the past 5 years in this house. Finally, when I finished cleaning up, I vaguely felt a bit of a stomachache. I endured the discomfort and dragged my suitcase outside. But Isabella happened to come in with Daphne and stood right in front of me. She lowered her eyes and saw the suitcase in my hand. She asked me in a cold voice, "Where are you going?" I instinctively took 2 steps back and said coldly, "Can't you see? I'm leaving." Isabella's gaze fell on the empty living room behind me. The vases, picture frames, and wine that I had bought before had all been packed and thrown out by me. Her face immediately darkened. "Didn't I say this morning that even if William comes back, he won't affect your position? He's at the airport right now. Did I mention divorce to you today? I also said that there's no need to deliberately attract my attention. After the agreement expires, we can add money to renew it. What are you making all this fuss for? All the things you threw away today, you have to buy them back for me tomorrow. I want my home to be exactly the same as it has been all these years." "Isabella, don't you like your ex-husband? Only by divorcing me can you have a future with your ex-husband." Since she couldn't let go of her ex in her heart, why wasn't she willing when I stepped aside? But the next second, she snatched the suitcase that I was holding tightly. "If I needed a future with him, I wouldn't need your magnanimity." Daphne had swollen lips and said vaguely, "I can see my dad today. I don't have to stay with the bad guy anymore." Isabella carried Daphne in front of me, and her tone was a bit reproachful. "Look, Daphne said you didn't give her breakfast today. She was so hungry that she ate the sandwich of her desk mate, and now her lips are swollen from the spiciness. James, even if Daphne isn't your biological daughter, you should at least pay some attention, right? In her current state, how can I explain to William?" No wonder Isabella came back in such a hurry with Daphne. She was here to hold me accountable. I lowered my eyes and saw Daphne's lips that were as swollen as sausages. "She's having an allergic reaction." Isabella was surprised. "Allergic? What is she allergic to?" Until now, she still didn't know that her daughter had a weak stomach and many allergens. It was normal for her to get red, swollen, and have spots if she wasn't careful. I still remember when we first got married, Isabella's family was poor. Daphne always had diarrhea and allergic reactions after eating my cooking. Isabella was busy with work and basically couldn't take care of such a young child. She would just coldly scold me for not taking good care of her. It was me who took my daughter to the hospital to test for allergens. If one hospital couldn't find out, we would go to another one. We went back and forth for a month before we figured out the child's physical condition clearly. It was also at that time that I accidentally learned a truth that was enough to drive Isabella crazy. Since then, I have taken even more meticulous care of Daphne, and she almost never had an allergic reaction again. Isabella naturally became a hands-off person with a clear conscience. Daphne grabbed my skirt unhappily. "I want to have dinner with my dad tonight. You go and get me the allergy medicine now." I coldly refused. "Don't you have hands? Go and get it yourself. The allergy medicine is in the medicine cabinet." I had always been obedient to Isabella and Daphne. My 2 acts of resistance today completely wore out Daphne's last bit of patience. Daphne raised her fist angrily and punched me hard in the stomach. "You bad guy. You don't deserve to stay in my house. I want Mom to kick you out." I had been feeling a bit of a stomach ache just now, and my body was weak. Although a child's strength wasn't great, a punch in my stomach hurt me so much that my face immediately turned pale. Isabella immediately grabbed her hand and scolded, "Daphne, who told you to hit people? Come here, I'll get you the medicine." My face was pale with pain, and cold sweat began to break out on my forehead. Isabella didn't notice my strange condition. I don't think she would believe that her daughter had hurt me. After she poured a glass of cold water for Daphne, she took out 2 tablets and handed them to her. After Daphne swallowed the tablets, she frowned and complained unhappily. "Why is it cold? You can't drink cold water when taking medicine." After saying that, she stretched out the cup with half a glass of water in front of me. "You go and pour me some hot water." I rubbed my stomach and didn't even give Daphne a glance. Daphne looked at me in disbelief. "You? Why are you so mean to me today? You didn't give me food and didn't send me to school. You were clearly not like this before. I really hate you more and more." Seeing that I didn't move for a long time, she looked at me angrily. "If you don't go now, I'll pour the water on you." Before I could say anything, Isabella's face completely darkened. She snatched the cup from Daphne's hand. Daphne, have you had enough of this? Who taught you to be so disrespectful to your dad? Daphne shouted with red eyes, he's not my dad. I only have one dad. He's just a money-loving nanny. If you don't give him money, he'll bully me, the nanny. The childish voice hit my heart like it had broken the gate of years of grievances and bitterness, making me feel uncomfortable and oppressed. Isabella grabbed her ear and scolded her sharply again. Don't listen to her nonsense. You're the dad, not a nanny. Suddenly, the phone dinged. Isabella lowered her eyes and took a look, and her expression immediately softened. I have to take the child out for a stroll. We're having dinner with her dad tonight. We can't keep William waiting. You can eat by yourself. Seeing this, Daphne's eyes immediately lit up with joy, and she quickly grabbed Isabella and rushed out. Mom, don't care about this bad guy. As long as you're willing to give him money, he won't leave even if you beat him to death. But Isabella didn't seem so reassured. Before closing the door, she deliberately looked at me and admonished. You don't look well. Just stay at home and rest. We'll be back as soon as possible. Then, the door slammed shut. I sat on the sofa and silently pursed my lips. I had mentioned divorce many times, but Isabella didn't seem to care at all. I had given all my love to their mother and daughter in the past, so they were fearless and didn't believe that I would really leave. They were probably going to miscalculate. I couldn't stay here any longer. Whether she signed the divorce agreement or not, I would leave today. I don't know how long it took for the stomach ache to gradually subside. The screen of my phone suddenly lit up and a message popped up. I clicked in and found that it was a text message from William. You've been Isabella's husband for 5 years and have enjoyed all the good things. Now that I'm back, it's time for you to get lost. Then a video popped up in the chat box. In the video, Daphne ran onto the car, happily sat on William's lap, and called him Dad obediently. Isabella sat next to them, and the smile on her face was a tenderness I had never seen before. In the last few seconds of the video, William suddenly turned his face and gently kissed Isabella on the cheek. At that moment when the screen froze, my fingers trembled slightly, and I slowly closed my eyes. I married Isabella in the first place because she had a pair of eyes and eyebrows similar to my first love. She wanted to save her company that was on the verge of bankruptcy and needed someone to take care of the child, and I needed emotional sustenance. In our daily interactions, I never mistook her for my first love. They were both good people in different ways, and confusing them was disrespectful to them. Moreover, at that time, I could also feel Isabella's sincerity. It can be said that in the first 2 years when she was at her lowest point, except for issues related to the child, we had been supporting each other and moving forward. She was also really good to me. She never missed giving me gifts on all festivals, and they were all bought according to my preferences. Sometimes, even if I just took a look at something in the mall, she would buy it back for me, regardless of the price, as long as I liked it. The charm of a beautiful, mature, and highly educated woman. Gradually, I fell for her and didn't know when I lost my heart. Falling in love with someone whose heart wasn't yet empty was really a bitter pill to swallow. William in the chat box was still sending messages continuously, and every word described Isabella's love for him. I couldn't help it and replied to him, if Isabella, who loves you so much, knew that the daughter she has raised for 7 years isn't her biological daughter at all, what do you think she would do? After saying that, without giving William a chance to reply, I blocked him in one go. I had already prepared the return gift for William's torture of me. As soon as I left, someone would send it to Isabella. Just then, the flight sent me a message reminder that it would depart in 3 hours. I turned off the screen, picked up the suitcase, and walked outside. When I was about to go out, I looked back. Having served as a servant for their mother and daughter for the past 5 years was probably my punishment, punishing me for having impure motives when I agreed to marry her. But it won't be like that anymore. I won't look for emotional sustenance from women anymore. Their mother and daughter will be erased from my life one by one. After getting on the plane, I sent Isabella the last text message. I won't renew the agreement after it expires. Remember to sign it. It's over. On the other side, Isabella sat at the dining table, gently rubbing the wine glass with her fingers. Remembering my pale face, for some reason, she felt a bit uneasy in her heart. The meal was almost finished. William sat beside her, and the strong scent of perfume surrounded her. Isabella frowned, and William's hand rested on the back of her hand. Isabella, it's getting late. Why don't you come to my place today? We can have a couple more drinks. Isabella pulled her hand back. Let's drink next time. It's getting late. I'll take my daughter home first. After saying that, without waiting for William to reply, she took Daphne and headed home. But when they got home, I was already gone. Isabella's uneasiness in her heart grew stronger and stronger. When she took out her phone and saw the text message, she became even more flustered. She made several phone calls, but all of them showed that the other party was out of the service area. Just then, the doorbell rang. She quickly opened the door. When she saw that the person standing outside was a delivery man, her eyes visibly fell with disappointment. Miss Isabella, this is a package sent to you. Isabella was surprised. For me? She took the package and opened it. The 4 big words, divorce agreement, jumped into my sight conspicuously. Isabella's face immediately darkened. She opened the agreement and found that there was also a page of reports sandwiched in the middle of the agreement. Identification conclusion. There is no blood relationship between the identified person Isabella and the identified person Daphne. Isabella was as if struck by lightning. She mechanically looked at Daphne beside her, who was busy making a video call with William. The document in her hand was crumpled by her fist. She stepped forward and picked up Daphne. The tablet in Daphne's hand fell to the ground with a thud. William called out a few times on the other end of the screen. Isabella picked up the tablet. Now, come to the hospital immediately. I have something to ask you. Isabella took Daphne to do a second paternity test, and the result of the report was exactly the same as the one I gave her. Daphne didn't understand what was going on. She just felt that her mother's face was too terrifying. She was so scared that she stood in the corner with red eyes and didn't dare to move. Only then did William arrive late in his leather shoes. Seeing Isabella from a distance, he quickly trotted over with a smile. Isabella, why did you call me to the hospital? Are you not feeling well? Isabella's eyes turned cold, and she raised her hand and slapped him across the face. William was a bit stunned by the blow. When he came to his senses, he covered his burning cheek in disbelief. Isabella, how dare you hit me? Isabella didn't waste any more words. She threw the report in her hand hard at his face. What's going on? Back then, in the car accident, I had a premature birth, and you accompanied me throughout the delivery. Now, where's my child? Where has my child gone?
Whose child is Daphne?
William picked up the report and took a glance. His eyes immediately tightened. Isabella, this isn't what you think. Listen to my explanation. Explanation? Isabella sneered, picked up the bag in her hand and threw it at him hard, pressing him heavily against the wall. You left me behind back then and calculated to make me raise your child for you. Do you think I'm stupid? Explain clearly what exactly happened to my child. Back then, you had a premature birth, and the child didn't survive. This child is my ex-girlfriend's. Her child is about the same age as ours. Upon hearing this, Isabella was instantly furious. You actually cheated on me and made me raise your ex-girlfriend's child. William, you bastard. William was beaten up by her with the bag. In the end, Isabella raised her hand and slapped him hard again. When William was almost choked to the point of suffocation, Isabella finally let go of her hand. He had a bruised face and sat slumped on the ground. There was no trace of emotion in Isabella's voice. Later, I will ask someone to list out the bills of how much your daughter has spent here with me over the years. You are limited to bring out this money within a week. If you can't bring it out, then I can only let my lawyer have a good chat with you. After saying that, Isabella left without looking back. After I arrived in Paris, I moved into a 2-story small villa. I divided the money into 2 parts. One part was used as working capital, and the other part was used to invest in a business. My major in university was financial management. If I hadn't been stupid enough to marry Isabella back then, should have had my own career. However, it's never too late to start a business. I have extremely strong executive ability. The next day after moving in, I started making plans and looking for storefronts. Until a month later, my company was operating steadily and began to show its presence in the market. I was so busy that I was dizzy. The secretary knocked on the door of my office carefully. Only after getting my permission did she stick half of her body in. "James, there is a person who claims to be Mr. William and wants to see you."
My hand that was busy stamping paused.
I was searching in my mind who Mr. William was, but the door was suddenly kicked open with a bang. William rushed into my office aggressively with Daphne, looking at me with a hint of anger in his eyes. "I've finally found you, James." I was stunned for a moment when I looked at William's appearance. Before this, I had only seen him once in his wedding photo with Isabella. He was a handsome man with a noble young master's temperament. But now, the William standing in front of me had dark circles under his eyes that couldn't be covered up, and he looked completely exhausted. Seeing me sizing him up, he became even more angry and directly questioned me. "Did you tell Isabella about that thing?" I frowned and thought for a while and finally suddenly realized, "Do you mean the thing that Isabella has raised her daughter for 7 years, but it turns out that the daughter isn't hers? I knew it was you. You son of a bitch, have you managed to hide it for so many years? If it weren't for your meddling, how could she have noticed?" William was so angry that he raised his hand to slap me. My eyes darkened, and I was just about to grab his arm when a cold voice suddenly sounded. "Stop." William's raised palm paused. Isabella walked in from outside the door, looking at William with cold eyes. "How did you find this place?" William's face turned pale, and he stammered. "When I went to your company to look for you last time, I overheard you talking on the phone with your assistant, saying that you were going to book a flight to Paris to see him." Isabella squinted her eyes. "It seems that I was too merciful for not sending you to jail directly." "No, it's not like that, Isabella. Listen to my explanation." There were 2 security guards following behind Isabella. After receiving her glance, they picked up William from left and right and carried him out. "Wait a minute, Isabella. Let me go." William struggled, wrinkling his clothes. Isabella ignored his embarrassed appearance and strode towards me. Daphne suddenly rushed forward and hugged Isabella's trouser leg, crying and howling, "Mom, I don't want you to go. I don't want you to leave." Daphne was crying very sincerely, but now the cry of this ungrateful child only made me feel annoyed. Isabella lowered her eyes and kicked Daphne away. "Stop shouting. I'm not your mother." Daphne was kicked to the ground by Isabella, and her eyes were full of grievances. Several new security guards came into the office and sent William and his daughter out together in one go. The office suddenly became quiet. Isabella looked at me and said in a hoarse voice, "James, can we have a chat?" Only after getting my permission did she slowly take a seat opposite me. "James, I know that William sent you that video." At that time, I had drunk a little wine and didn't have time to dodge. "But now I've already made William leave with his daughter." I interrupted her softly, "Just get to the point and try to be brief. I'm very busy, and I still have work to do." Isabella pursed her lips and looked at me hesitantly. "I'm sorry, James." When I heard the words, "I'm sorry," my eyelid twitched. In the 5 years since I married her, this was the first time I had heard these 3 words from her mouth. So, Isabella could also apologize. Isabella lowered her eyes, and her voice was full of sincerity. "You've been wronged these past few years. Since you left, I've only then realized how important you are to me. Can we start over?" My pen tip paused, and I lifted my eyelids to look at her. Isabella nervously wiped the sweat from her forehead. I could clearly see that she cared a lot about my answer. But the more she was like this, the more ridiculous I felt. "What, Isabella? Can't you even afford to hire a nanny? Do you need your ex-husband to remarry you and continue to serve you tea and water?" Isabella's face froze, and she explained in a flurry, "That's not what I meant, James. I really want to treat you well." I sneered, "Isabella, come and talk to me about this again when you learn how to respect others." Isabella still wanted to say something. My secretary, who received my instruction, happened to come in at this moment. "Miss Isabella, please leave. Next time, please remember to wait for our James in the guest waiting area and don't barge into his office without permission again." Not long after this incident, I received an invitation to a jewelry dinner party. I knew very well that connections were extremely important for a person doing business. That night, I got dressed and ready and took my blonde and blue-eyed male secretary to the dinner party. Unexpectedly, at the dinner party, I saw a familiar face again. Isabella also saw me, and she gently put down her wine glass and walked towards me. I instinctively turned around and was about to leave. Suddenly, the lights of the dinner party shone on me, and the venue became quiet. Isabella's voice sounded from behind me. I turned around and saw Isabella kneeling on one knee. Her fingertips slowly opened the red box in her hand. "James, now I want everyone to witness my love for you. Would you be willing to give me a chance to pursue you again?" When the eyes of everyone fell on me, I suddenly realized this wasn't a jewelry exchange dinner party at all. It was just a trap Isabella had set for me. Looking at Isabella in front of me, my eyes dimmed. Sure enough, she couldn't learn how to respect others. I looked at the expensive watch in the box and felt a strange sense of familiarity. I had seen it before in Isabella's treasured photo album. There was a picture of William wearing a watch that looked similar to this one. But now that Isabella was giving it to me, this watch was more expensive and had better taste than the one William had before. The crowd let out a scream. Goodness, I'm not seeing things, am I? It's the Heart of the Ocean watch worth tens of millions. What on earth is this gentleman's background? The Heart of the Ocean comes as a set, with one big and one small diamond-encrusted watch. I heard that Isabella gave the smaller one to Mr. William. I didn't expect that she would leave the bigger one to this gentleman. The crowd became restless, and everyone's eyes fell on me, waiting for my next answer. I said softly, "Sorry, I decline." The atmosphere of the party cooled down. My blonde and blue-eyed secretary beside me stepped forward and raised her wine glass towards Isabella in a teasing manner. "Sorry, Miss Isabella. Mr. James already has a female companion. Don't steal my thunder." After saying that, the secretary pulled me and left without looking back. Isabella chased out from the venue all the way. Finally, she grabbed my wrist and asked me unwillingly, "James, haven't you ever had feelings for me in these 5 years? Do you really have to be so heartless?" I shook off her hand and said coldly, "Isabella, don't be too self-righteous. If you didn't look like her back then, do you think I would have married you?" Isabella was stunned for a moment. "Like her?
Who is she?"
I sneered. "It's none of your business." I turned around and got into the passenger seat, slamming the car door shut. Isabella clung to the window and looked at me with hurt in her eyes. "So, you've been by my side for all these years just because I look like someone else?" I quietly rolled up the car window, and the secretary stepped on the gas pedal and drove away. After this incident, I didn't see Isabella for a long time. Until one morning, when I went to work at the company, I happened to see a familiar-looking child standing outside the company gate. When the child saw me, her eyes lit up and she ran towards me, reaching out to hug me. I quietly took 2 steps back. When she saw my action, she retracted her hand dejectedly. The child's face was black, her hair was messy, and her clothes seemed to have not been changed for a long time. There was even a hole in her pants. I looked at her for a while before I could recognize from her facial features that it was Daphne. I raised my eyebrows. "Have you been to a coal mine?" If it were in the past when she heard me say this, with Daphne's character, she would definitely have been furious. But now, her ears just turned red, and she lowered her head in embarrassment. "Dad doesn't want me anymore." I nodded as I had expected. William had offended Isabella, a tough nut to crack. Presumably, he couldn't even take care of himself and had no time to care about his own daughter. I asked Daphne, "Then what are you doing here looking for me?" Daphne clasped her hands in embarrassment. "I'm hungry. Can you give me something to eat?" After saying that, she nervously lowered her head. She looked at me in surprise only when she heard me say, "Okay." I asked the secretary to prepare an extra serving of breakfast. Daphne was probably really hungry for a long time and wolfed down the food. She ate up an adult's portion of food cleanly. I had mixed emotions and still sent a text message to Isabella. After Daphne finished eating and wiped her mouth, she said, "Sincerely, thank you, Uncle James." This was the first time I had heard this address from this ungrateful child. After all, in the past, she had always referred to me as hey or that person. I was suddenly a bit intrigued and raised my eyebrows. Daphne blushed and apologized. I was wrong before.
I'm sorry.
You? There was a hint of hope in Daphne's eyes. Can you still be my dad? I smiled gently. What kind of daydream are you having? Isabella came quickly. This time, she was smarter and didn't barge into my office without permission. Only after getting my permission did she follow the secretary and come in. When Daphne saw her, she shrank back in fear. I don't want to go back to that place. However, the people behind Isabella didn't give her a chance to struggle. They stepped forward and picked Daphne up like a chick and carried her out. I looked at this scene in surprise. What's going on? Isabella sat down opposite me, her eyes complicated. I sent William to prison, and I sent his daughter to an orphanage. It turned out that this child sneaked out these 2 days, and that's how she found you here. I let out an oh and teased. I thought you cared a lot about her before. Why don't you just raise her? Isabella's face darkened. I was blind before. I said those excessive things to you because of her.
I'm sorry.
I chuckled. No need to apologize. I don't plan to forgive you either. Isabella looked at me deeply and asked me persistently, James, is there really no future for us? I filled a cup with tea and placed it in front of her. Actually, I've never liked drinking alcohol. I only love drinking tea, but every time I went out with you when I was forced to drink, you turned a blind eye. Isabella's fingers froze. I continued, Daphne has a delicate stomach, and you can't eat spicy food. And my favorite flavor is spicy. For the two of you, in the past 5 years, I haven't eaten any food that suits my taste. I've spent my youth these past few years revolving around the two of you. If you had always treated me the same way, I would have felt happy too. But as soon as William came back, you and your daughter changed. You started to criticize my faults and mock me for not being as good as William. I put down the teapot, Isabella. Where do you get the confidence to think that I would forgive all this and get back together with you? Isabella's throat felt dry. She picked up the tea and took a few sips without saying a word. Finally, she let out a long sigh. I let you down, James. I won't ask you this question again. I respect your choice and wish you happiness. Isabella left. Just as she said, she never appeared in my life again after that. My company was thriving, and my status in the financial world was gradually rising. On Christmas of the new year, my secretary confessed her love to me, and I happily accepted. But this time, when it came to balancing love and career, would unhesitatingly favor the latter. Isabella would occasionally send me various greeting text messages. When I was in a good mood occasionally, I would reply with 1 or 2 sentences. When Isabella saw the photo of my little girlfriend in my WeChat moments, she asked me if I was in a relationship. I replied with a yes. She said, okay, then I wish you happiness. After that, Isabella never sent me a message again. However, every year on my birthday, I would receive an anonymous gift. I knew it was sent by Isabella. Each gift was of great value, and I accepted them all. I regarded it as compensation for the mental damage fee for these 5 years. On Christmas of another year, my little girlfriend leaned against my arms, and I lazily pinched her earlobe. The snow outside the window was falling thick and fast. I knew that my happiness had just begun.